Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Unstuck Pod. Excited today to have Paul Heirendt here as a guest. So, Paul, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me, Jamie. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. So you've had quite an interesting journey. I'd love for you to share a little bit about you, your journey, and we'll get to what you're doing now. But let's kind of work our way up because I think there's some interesting things that folks would want to hear.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot done in my 12 years. So
Amazing.
my wife says I act like a 12-year-old sometimes. So
There you go. Join the club.
yeah. So I started out, I went to a very interesting high school. I would put it that way. It was an experimental high school in Southern California. So I got exposure to a lot of great opportunities. Also, I grew up in the house of a man that was raised in an orphanage during the Great Depression and left that orphanage to create a business that actually there's a business still there today in Chicago. When he sold it as Victor's Tailor and Furriers. So he went from penniless in an orphanage, taking his two brothers and a friend out, opening a small cleaners, put the cleaners across the street out of business, and then became a tailor and furrier. Ultimately, at World War II, ended up going in the Coast Guard. His two brothers left to go to the Army. He went in the Coast Guard, and so sold the business. But so I had an upbringing that was really, I didn't understand, neither did my other 9 siblings. I come from a family of 10. He was trying to create his own orphanage, I think. But anyway, so I didn't understand the kind of awesome upbringing I got and the training I got in what it means to be successful and what it means to work hard, right? That was just a given. I'll give you an example. We got paid 10 cents an hour when we worked around the house, and it wasn't normal chores, just anything above and beyond normal chores. But we didn't get paid the 10 cents. It got recorded in my mom's little black book. So it was great financial training. So anyway, in high school, had the privilege of our high school was, like I said, an experimental high school, and it was designed for 2,200 kids, but there were 4,400 kids. So they had to do a lot of things to make that work. One of them was they had closed circuit TV to all the classrooms. And so they hired a guy from Hollywood to manage that. And their idea was he would just manage the students going in a room and changing the channel on TV. They shouldn't have hired anybody from Hollywood. Because starting in my freshman year, we started building a studio and ultimately did programming. We filmed, a friend and I that worked primarily together, actually in junior high, but in high school, we started filming the football games. But by our sophomore year, we were using a Sony Betacam pack. So we'd already started moving to video. So great opportunity. I was also in every musical organization on campus and off. So great opportunity to play music. So when it came time to go to college, I got a call that our band had been booked for a year, more than a year solid. And I'm standing in line to register for college and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I went home and called and said, yeah, I'll go on the tour, right?
Amazing.
And then my dad didn't like the fact that I was gone for a month or two and then just hung out on my sailboat or went surfing the rest of the time. So he said, come work with me and learn to sell because you can always sell something. And he taught me the ultimate lessons that became this book. Oops, where is it? That book right there.
Yeah, you got to get that right. You got to plan that. That's better.
I'm used to being behind the camera, not in front of the camera. So entrepreneur means do, right? He epitomized that, right? He was a sales rep and a regional manager in medical book sales. So I started working with him when I wasn't on tour, started enjoying that. He paid me $10 a day and gave me lunch, right? Bought my lunch. I didn't think that was very good since I was making $100 an hour playing music. So I got some other lines independently, publishers that didn't have a sales force. And so I would help him get set up and then I'd go call on doctors in their offices, right? So great training, amazing training. I have nerve eruption scars from the nervousness and the stress of doing that. But it was ultimately the best training I could ever have had, right? Because that's a skill that still applies today. We, with our modern consulting company, one of our most effective things is to go door to door to talk to business owners about what they're struggling with and how we can help them, right? So that training, that basic training was like boot camp in the Marines, but maybe more like in special forces, right? It was really pretty amazing. So I ended up getting engaged and when I got engaged, I thought I need a real job. So my dad and I were at a convention in San Diego, and the Mosby, he worked for a company called JB Lippincott Company. And the Mosby rep was there. He was actually a district manager, and his booth didn't show up, and neither did his books. So I said, Al, don't worry about it. Jump in my van. So I drove him up to the University of California, San Diego bookstore. I knew the bookstore manager really well. And so I said to her, look, he's really in trouble because he's at this biology convention and doesn't even have the main book he's there to promote. It just came out. She goes, I have 10 copies. I
Oh,
said,
nice.
great. Can we take 10? She goes, no. I don't remember if she let us have 8, but I remember saying, no, you can't take all the copies. So we got him a bunch of books, Mosby books, brought it back, got some poster board and made what looked like a headstone for a grave. And we wrote RIP, our booth didn't make it, right? So that went really well for him. And at the end of the convention, he said, can I offer you a job? Well, the night before, my mom and my fiance at that point came down to have dinner with us. And so that was celebrating our engagement. And actually, at one point, my mom had said to me, we like Karen. And if you guys don't end up getting married, she's in, you're out. So I call it my reverse shotgun wedding.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, so him offering me a job was perfect timing because I knew I needed more than just being an independent rep where I didn't get paid till they got paid for the book, and they let doctors pay $5 a month, right? So I had a whole lot of money banked on paper, but that's not the same thing, right? It was like 10 cents an hour in my mom's black book. Couldn't spend it. So anyway, so I moved into selling and was pretty successful, enough so that they asked me to be field sales trainer and then asked me to be district manager about 5 months after that because I kept having to go to the same territory over and over again because they didn't have a district manager and the reps there, even though I trained them well, I think, they just didn't stick. So they made me district manager. Subsequently, I was at a convention in Las Vegas and my dad's boss, senior VP of sales and marketing from Lippincott, came over to the booth and said, I'm going to take you to lunch today. And I said, well, I can't leave. I'm assigned here. He goes, I'll get somebody to cover. So he went and convinced my mom, who always worked with my dad, to come over and cover the Mosby booth, right? While we went to lunch, and he offered me the national sales manager position, which I didn't really understand the gravity of that. But my dad said, look, they offered it to me once. I passed it up because I didn't want to move to Philadelphia, but this is a chance of a lifetime. And I was 27, right? So I was like, okay, I didn't know any better. And I got there and I remember sitting in my office the first day, first time I had been to the offices. My boss then, who was the senior VP of sales and marketing, he said, well, here's my secretary. She'll help you. And she says, oh, look, it's Nina with a beard, my mom's name, right? So I was humbled from the beginning, right? But that worked out really well. I kind of fumbled my way through it. Part of it was they hadn't had a sales manager in 4 years. So it's like, well, I can't do too much harm because they haven't done anything managerially, right? But I kind of figured out that accountability is a key, right? So they had never published standings and they wouldn't let me publish the standings, but I would put the standings on my bulletin board that I would print out. And then I would underline where I thought the break even was for supporting a rep. So I did it with a red marker. And I didn't know this, but months later, my then secretary came in and she said, I get a call every month about this time. I said, who? From almost every rep. I said, what are they calling about? They want to know if they're above or below the red line.
No way.
Yeah. So that taught me about accountability, right? That accountability is critical.
You're popular right now, Paul.
Man, I got to put it on Do Not Disturb. Sorry about that.
It's okay. No problem.
No, that's
At least
my day.
everyone knows it's real, right? You're not AI. It's real.
It's real.
Because
Well, I am AI. I'm artificially intelligent. But other than that. So anyway, so that's a long story, but you get a picture for kind of my background and stuff. So then I decided if I was traveling 80% of the time, I went from managing the national sales force to being head of global sales. So I was traveling all the time. Our kids were small. And I thought, if I have to mow lawns for a living, My wife was not happy in New Jersey, right just outside of Philadelphia. So I said, if I have to mow lawns for a living, we're moving back to California. So Mosby heard we were moving. They called me and said, how are you getting back? I said, our furniture left yesterday. Karen's picking me up today. They said, stop in St. Louis. So they said, come back and rebuild the sales force because they had screwed it up royally, which is the main reason I was open to taking the job, right? Because it was kind of a disaster at Mosby. So I said, okay. And I had 3 conditions. One of them was I'm never moving to St. Louis. So the moral of the story is never say never, because here I am in St. Louis. Holy cow, even the do not disturb's not working.
Wait, and so hold on. I want to know how long you lasted outside of St. Louis. So you went back to you went to California,
Yeah,
and
we
you
moved.
worked in St. Louis. But how long were you able to avoid moving back there or
Yeah,
moving there? I should say.
there was a battle for 4 years, and then they hired a new
Okay.
VP of sales who lasted about 15 minutes. But his one real accomplishment, besides getting himself fired for being a moron, his real accomplishment was that he convinced me, he said, move or else. And I tell people I found out what or else paid and we moved. So,
Okay. There you go.
and that was 1986 and it's been great for us. Wonderful for our family. And the opportunity was great. I came back, rebuilt the sales force, created a joint venture with other medical publishers. So it was a global joint venture. And then Mosby asked me to come back, and we had tried to start an electronic publishing division in 1984. A group of us did it without, kind of as a skunk works, without asking permission. And then Times Mirror Corporate got involved and they screwed it all up. So my boss, who we had been sales reps, district managers together. He was the VP of nursing when I was recruited to come back to Mosby. He was ultimately the president of Mosby. And he said, I want you to come back to Mosby and I want you to do M&A and rebuild the electronic publishing program. So it was a wonderful opportunity. I had authority to go write a $10 million check on any company that I thought was
Wow.
accretive, and that passed our accountant's due diligence, right? So that was a great experience to see how people ran and misran their businesses, right? And how people structured them for tax advantage, which meant we could offer them about half of what the business was really worth because they did not have the cash flow or the profit to show because they had run it as a tax advantage personal business, right? Anyway,
For so long.
great lessons
yeah.
that are coming in really handy working with small businesses today. So started the electronic publishing division. That went really well. For 3 years, it had been in every acquisition editor's goals to create electronic product. None of them had done anything. So I started the division, and from July to December, we ended up with 70 titles. And partly because I didn't create individual titles, I built 3 different engines that were product engines, right? So individual books back then on floppy disk, libraries on CD-ROM, and then multimedia titles for the color atlases, right? In medicine, in dermatology, and some of the other specialties, color is critical, right? So we had another platform for publishing those. So it went really well, very successful, got a gigantic bonus, about 3/4 of what my annual salary was. So I thought everything was great. And then all the editors wanted control of their products. And so I had already gotten very frustrated with how they were blocking everything we were trying to do that was run it as a business, not as a kind of vanity project for the authors, right? A lot of resistance by the authors. It's like we sold 1,200 of the emergency medicine library before I had done anything other than spend an all-nighter making a demo of what it would look like. Right. So it was like, I'm running this like it's a business. I'm not running this like a vanity project. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I said, that's fine. So I jumped out and started a small company with one of the guys that I was kind of mentoring in the business development role. And we started what we called the Visual Press, which was great. But when I was at Lippincott, we had acquired a company called Drug Facts and Comparisons. And the lady that was the marketing director then, and I took her around to the sales force and all the major distributors, and we introduced the product, right? Because we had acquired it at Lippincott, right out from under Mosby's nose. It's less than a block from where Mosby's offices were. So anyway, when I got to St. Louis, and she knew I was in St. Louis, so we would have lunch about once a year. And then she heard I had left Mosby. And so she called me and said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I have the Visual Press. We're creating CD-ROMs primarily for a company called back then it was software marketing, and then they got acquired by the Learning Company. So she said, well, we've been trying to get our loose leaf notebook, which every month a pharmacist or a doctor had to put pages in to update it, right? Like the legal loose leaf, same idea.
Yeah. Right.
She said, I heard you did that kind of with Times Mirror with Matthew Bender. And so would you take a project to help us? And I said, sure. So I took the project, and from July to December, they'd spent 3.5 years trying to get the book on electronic form. And in those few months, we had product to deliver at the big pharmacology convention in December. So very successful. She asked me to come on and be the publisher for healthcare. And I said, okay, that sounds great. Except that I got back in, then I was in another corporate life, and I realized after 3.5 years, or 3 years, I think it was, I thought, I don't like this. This is not how I'm built. All the politics, all the resistance. She ended up getting fired. They asked me to be CEO. I said, no way, because this has been run like a dysfunctional family. I said, I'll be the CEO if you let me just basically clean house and start over. And they said, oh, we can't do that. This is our cash cow. I said, well, it's the goose that lays the golden egg, but you aren't going to have any more golden eggs because they're killing the goose. They didn't believe me, and I didn't really want the job anyway. So I once again went out on my own. So a friend of mine was an inventor and a former Bell Labs scientist, and he was working with a company called Paylinks here in St. Louis, which was the first internet payment gateway. But it was software you had to install on your computer if you were a merchant or if you were a bank, right? So George said, I heard you left Fax Comparisons, and this was at a lunch, and he says, I want you to come talk to Bob, the CEO of Paylinks, and because you turned books into a service, I think you could certainly turn software into a service. And there was really no SaaS. That was 1997. So it was before Salesforce.com and their famous no software, right? So I came back and we started working on that project. In the interim, George said, I published this paper on voice biometrics, applying neural nets to speaker identity verification back in 1986. He said, I think right now with Paylinks, we're enabling these credit card transactions, these merchants to take more fraud more efficiently. We're not really solving the problem of, is this the cardholder in these remote transactions? So he said, I think we can use voice biometrics for that. So we formed a company called Trade Harbor, trade being harbor and, trade being exchange and harbor being a safe place. And then our service was called the Voice Signature Service. So we created as a software service company in October 98. So about the same time that Salesforce started. So that was a fun ride. I raised $9 million for that company. At the end of the day, we did a lot of transactions for people to get either health insurance or SNAP benefits over the phone because they could be authenticated, right? The credit card industry, we learned, didn't really want to solve the fraud problem because they make more money on the fraud tools than they make on the transactions themselves anymore. So it was one of those really disheartening realizations, but I thought, okay, can't do this anymore. In the meantime, I had been spending a lot of time out in Silicon Valley, partly because my family's in California and my parents were in the Central Coast. So I could go out to San Jose and then fly into San Jose, drive down to Paso Robles, visit my folks, and then drive back up and work for the week or do it on the other end, right? So it was great, a great time. I had met a bunch of really, really outstanding entrepreneurs, mostly in the cybersecurity world, because that's what we supported was cybersecurity, basically, right? Authenticating people, being not just out-of-band authentication, but out-of-band that makes sure it really is you, right? Not just somebody who has control of your phone so they can type in the 4-digit password, right? Which I still, every time I do it, I chuckle a little bit, but also kind of moan right at the same time. Anyway, so that was fun. And they kept asking me to get involved in advising different startups. And then they wanted to start different startups. So we started a bunch. Silicon Valley is a pace that people just can't understand, right? And people do. There's a quote in my book that entrepreneurs do more than what people can expect with less than what you would think is possible, right? And that's John Doerr, a famous venture capitalist, right? I think that's who made the statement. I might be wrong. Check my book. It's in there. But the point is, they don't have the attitude of, well, show me your first 10 customers and then we'll fund you, right? No, they have the idea of, if you got an idea, let's test it. right? So anyway, so it was a fun time. We created a bunch of companies. Most of them were interesting lessons, but we created one called Cyber Deadbolt that ended up getting acquired before we even got to a beta product. And so that
Wow.
was fun. We kind of culminated several different things we'd been working on together. One was helping people secure their own identity using blockchain and using AI to model that user, right? And then on top of that, authenticate them, right?
Can I wait, Paul? I need to just check in with you on this one. So you say we use blockchain and AI for that. And can you tell me the year that you're talking about when you're talking about that business?
We started working on it in 2016 on the side, and it took off in 2017, and we were acquired early in 2017. And I was locked up until December 2017. And the problem is the company that acquired it wanted to use it for enterprise security. And it was like the whole point was putting people in control of their own identity, not the company, not corporate sovereignty, right? Or government sovereignty. These self-sovereign identity plays the way you use your driver's license and your social security card, right, as proofs of identity. It's like, no, that's just stupid, right? Anyway, so that was fun, but I spent the last quarter of 2017 thinking, do I want to do this again? Right. But also that aching feeling that there's an opportunity for individuals to control their identity. So so the last quarter, I had been speaking at quite a few conferences, especially out in San Francisco, which I primarily did that as an excuse and a business expense to get out and see my family, quite frankly, and work with my friends. So it was part of my strategy. But that one company that kept booking me, they used to do just cybersecurity conferences. Then two people split out. One split out, started blockchain conferences, and the other one split out and started AI conferences. So they had been bugging me to speak. So that fourth quarter, I started lining up talks for 2018 when I knew I was free to talk, right? And working on my idea called Block ID. And the idea of Block ID is that you use blockchain to secure a person's identity, not only a person's identity, but you can give a guaranteed globally unique ID to anything, right? A transaction, a step in a process, a piece of art. And this is before the whole scam thing of art as secured assets, which
Right.
that was another giggle point for me. It's like, oh, this is going to have a half-life of a turtle. So, wait, turtles live a long time. Half-life of a guppy. That's better.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I started speaking at all these conferences, at least one a month, some months two, all over the country in Canada. It was great experience. And I was using it really as my old friend, Eric Rees, who I interviewed in 2015 at South by Southwest. A friend of mine that was on the team, we were down there interviewing people, and he retells the story. We're sitting there at lunch and Paul's just gone. Somebody said, "Where'd Paul go?" And Kyle said, "I don't know. He just disappeared." And then he saw me running after Eric Rees because I knew what he looked like. And I said, "Can we talk to you about being an entrepreneur?" And so he said, "Sure." So anyway, Eric Rees's whole point is, right, build an MVP and test, use science. The last quote I got from him, I said, "What's the one thing you'll tell an entrepreneur if you have 1 minute with them before they go out into the world?" He said, "Everything in life is as an experiment. Use science." That's also a quote in the book, by the way.
Nice.
Several quotes from Eric in the book. But the point is, I was able to use that 2018 and all those speaking gigs to meet with potential corporate customers, met with a lot of VCs and angels, met with a ton of kind of normal customers and consumers to say, would you use this? And what I came to really probably well before the end of 2018, but I let the momentum carry me through December. But the finding was, again, I was probably 10, if not 15 years too early. That was
Too early.
2018 and still nobody's doing what I was talking about, right? And basic idea was you take anything and you give it a guaranteed globally unique ID, and then you characterize it by whatever factors you want that builds a dynamic model for it, right? So an individual, it could be your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Instagram, right? Those change second by second, right? Multiple times a second in the case of like Facebook or Instagram. So it's a very dynamic model of you that nobody could fake, right? And the point is nobody knows what's being used to create your model anyway. So they wouldn't even know what factors to try to fake. But I found people just aren't that interested in security, and they're willing to live with the bad things that happen on the internet. So I thought, okay, life's too short. I'm not doing that. So that's when I just
Or to
started.
help people that don't want to be helped, right? It's the
Well, the more importantly, they don't want to pay. They want to be helped, they say. But then when you ask them to pay, it's like, "Oh, no, I thought it'd be free." It's like, well, it is free. I'm only charging you for the value, not for the thing itself, right?
yes.
Anyway, so that's kind of my story. I kind of made it long and dragged out. But so I
No,
spent,
no, no.
after 2018, I decided my son and I had a media production company, and we had started in 2017, actually before that, but we live stream a couple of events out in San Francisco and then a couple of other things here in town. And so I thought I need to get back to my real roots, all the way back to high school days, right? Of working for the local cable station, right? Producing content. So my son and I started a media production company. Well, we kind of had it already, but started in earnest, called Big River Media Group. And so that still continues today. And we're on the phone today, and he says, "Dude, I'm like overbooked for June. Can you help out?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me see." So it's been fun. And we started live streaming before I like to say most people could spell it, right? And then I also hosted a weekly show at our local, it's called Nine Network of Public Media, our local PBS station. And that was called 1 Million Cups. It's a program out of the Kauffman Foundation. And we were the first city to actually not only do video, but we were doing live streaming because Nine Network donated their crew and their studio space. So it was a fantastic opportunity. And it really got a lot of attention in town for our business of streaming. And then when the pandemic hit, Katie barred the door. It was crazy. All kinds of nonprofits couldn't have their galas, so they wanted to do virtual galas. We did all kinds of really interesting things. I got involved in the local nonprofit folk and roots venue here called the Focal Point because the guy who had run sound there for the first 50 years, basically, he was primarily it. Other people filled in, but he called me and said, "You probably don't know who I am." I said, "Oh, no, I know who you are. I've been to the Focal Point several times. I've enjoyed your mixing, and our son's a roofer." He goes, "Yeah, that's how I got your number." Because Ben talked to Jesse and got your number. He said, our whole mission is to support the arts and the artists, and we can't do anything because we can't have concerts, can't have people here. So he says, "We're looking at live streaming. Will you help us?" So I came in and we set up, got them cameras and a switcher and set them up. And we were able to live stream concerts once a week. They were doing 3 concerts a week in person, but we did one a week and had the artists come in and not pointing at the stage. We actually put black curtain across the back of the room so the band could spread out, and we only had minimal crew, and we were able to live stream, and 100% of the donations during the live stream went to the artists. So I don't think we're the only thing that kept some of those artists alive, but some of them said, "I would not have survived financially had the Focal Point not supported us," right?
It's amazing.
So then I stayed
Yeah,
on after that for a while. I produced personally almost 400 full concert videos. So and then I realized, okay, I'm spending way too much time on this. It's a nonprofit and I'm 100% volunteer. I need to do other things, right? So that's actually when I decided to start working on my book, which technically I started in 1979 when I was that sales trainer, right? And earlier in the story, I realized that some of the sales reps I worked with didn't have the skills and knowledge that some of the other reps had, but they were more successful than those reps who had better skills and knowledge. And I come to the realization that the skills and knowledge don't mean anything unless you apply. So that's when I came up with the ASK principle. So when I became field sales trainer, I wrote this whole curriculum around the idea of application of your skills and knowledge, right? So in that case, sales skills, interpersonal skills, right? And the knowledge side, market knowledge and product knowledge, right? That was kind of the framework for the whole sales training. But the focus of it was get all that down, be an expert, but you have to actually get your butt out of bed and go make the calls, right? So that was really the genesis of it. So I wrote the book pretty quickly because I had kept notes of a lot of the things I had said over the years that I thought, wow, where'd that come from? I don't know, but it's pretty good. People say, "You have all these quotes. How'd you think that up?" I said, "I have no idea. It came to me at the time." And I fortunately was pretty good about writing it down, right? Plus, I
Yes,
love quotes from
absolutely.
other people that have been successful because that's how you get wisdom, right? is
Yeah.
to know wisdom is beyond knowledge, right? It's knowing not just something, but when and how and why to apply it, right? So anyway, so that's when I started working on the book. When I was pretty close to finished, my son said, "What are you going to call it?" I said, "The Ask Principle." He goes, "You're an idiot." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Nobody knows what that is. And if you look it up on the internet, there's about 9 things called the Ask Principle that are not yours." I said, he says, "Everybody in town, whenever there's some entrepreneurial thing and somebody talks about their grand plan, you're the one who says, okay, entrepreneur means do. What are you going to do next? Right? Don't tell me what your plans are. What are you going to do?" He goes, "That's what you're known for." And I thought, wow, entrepreneur means do. That's pretty cool. So the book is Entrepreneur Means Do, the Ask Principle, right? Because the do is the point, right? Nothing happens till somebody does something. Or the quote from my dad, which may not have been original from him, but I heard it when I was like 12 years old. So I'm going to credit him with it. Because, of course, I'm only 12. So that was 24 years ago. Or my math's wrong. Anyway,
Exactly. You're right.
anyway, that's how the book became named what it is, right? And now more recently, I've started a couple different for-profit companies and one not-for-profit organization that was around helping mentors get matched to mentees, right? So building a model of each and connecting a mentee to somebody who they should be talking to, not just who they could, right?
Right.
And that was born out of, I was given a couple of mentors. One was great. The others were horrid because they were middle managers, not even in big corp. I was a senior manager in a Times Mirror subsidiary, and Times Mirror was number 120 in the Fortune 500, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, some of the things you're telling me to do, I would have gotten in trouble for doing as a middle manager in my corporate life, right? I don't know how you thought you were successful doing that. But the bottom line is a mentor can only be helpful if they actually have practical suggestions and they're humble enough to learn from the entrepreneur as well, right? And that's our current business, Big Advisors Burning Issue Group. That's the big, right? So we go into companies and we don't come in as a consultant with a book of answers. We come in and embed as a co-CEO, helping the CEO or owner, whichever it is, and their management team, right, to help them find a healthy way to identify problems, quantify the problem, validate the problem first, quantify the problem, quantify steps that need to be taken to fix the problem, and then assign somebody self-assigned to take that on and a date, right? So this just very high accountability model, because we're working with a specialty plumbing contracting company. I had never heard about half the things they do, right? Super specialized. They get called in when other plumbing companies are stuck, right? Or the
Right.
drain is
Okay.
stuck more. They're called drain surgeons, right? But we've learned more about all of those technologies in 2 weeks than I care to know at this point. But my point is, we don't come in as experts in your business. We come in and help you actually apply what you know in a healthy way to move the business forward, right? And that comes through accountability. So it goes all the way back to the accountability issue, right? So we institute a weekly meeting we call a BAM meeting, and it's big accountability meeting, right? So burning issues, we identify burning issues, working with them. So they actually find the issue and describe it, quantify it and all that. And those are put on the wall. Like you've probably seen it, looks like poster paper, but they're giant Post-it notes.
Yep.
So we fill out one for every BPI. And in most cases, we write the kind of categories and then somebody from the company takes the marker and actually does the writing. And then whoever wants to take responsibility for it has to walk up with the marker and write their own name, and they have to stay there till the date. So that's what we call a big accountability meeting, right? They are owning that issue and they are owning fixing that issue. And everybody in the room knows they took ownership of it and knows what date was set. And so as Rick puts it, you don't want to come 2 months later into the room and find 4 BPIs with your name on it with red X's through the date with a new date in red, right? It's like,
not going to feel good for anybody,
no,
right?
and he warns them. He says,
It's like your red line that was the break even line. No one wants to be below that.
you
That
connected the dots. That's what I was saying when I said accountability leading to it, right? It comes back to that. It really does. And I wouldn't mow the lawn when I was growing up unless my dad said, mow that lawn, right? And said, I'm going to find out if you mowed the lawn or not when I drive in the driveway. It's like, yes, sir. Right. So it's, to me, it fits right in the ask principle, right? It's okay. I got great plans. That doesn't mean anything. If I know all about the subject, well, that doesn't mean anything, right? The one thing that I wrote down, one of my quotes in the book is, if a great opera singer never sings, it's a waste of a gift, right? It's like, you're not an opera singer unless you sing, right?
Right.
I have a lot of people say, well, I'm a great developer. What have you developed? Well, I worked on this team. It's like, no, that means you're a team member at a developer. Right? So anyway, it's that kind of language is important, right? And these days people, I would use a word, but I probably shouldn't, but they screw up words all the time, right? And they say, oh, well, it means this now. And it's like, no, it doesn't. Society decides what words mean, right? If I look up in the dictionary and I read what that word means, it's not what you're saying. My favorite line from Princess Bride, right? You keep using that word. It doesn't mean, I don't think it means what you think it means. He was using the word inconceivable
Yeah.
in terms of,
Yeah, no.
in terms
Yeah.
of the idea.
For Rick Moranis,
Yeah.
trying to think faster.
Vizzini was the one using the word inconceivable. And it proves he's not all that smart because later he says, I would not choose the glass in front of me and drink the poison, right?
Nice. So listen, your career, the journey is fascinating, right? And the lessons that flow out of it are fascinating. And obviously the good news is you're able to still, I say, help let others get or benefit from all the learnings that you have over that time between the book and running the sessions that you have. When somebody listens, watches this, how can they find you? How can they find the book? How do they find you? Like, what's the best way for them to get to you?
Yeah. The book is, you probably can't spell my last name, which doesn't matter.
We'll put links or we'll put
Okay.
it'll be in the description.
Yeah.
Everything will be in the description. So
Yeah.
don't worry.
So my book's on Amazon. It's hardback, paperbound, ebook, and audiobook. And it's me reading the audiobook because, again, my son yelled at me because I was having a AI clone of my voice read it. And he goes, dude, do not do that. You got to read it yourself, right? So it was a month of in my studio doing what I don't like to do anymore. I used to do an hour-long radio show back in the 70s, but I have a face for radio. So, but
And what else? And sorry, and the site for the consulting business.
yes.
What's
So
the website?
you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably a great way to connect with me because I get a lot of other spammy stuff from Facebook and other platforms, but LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me professionally. And then our business is bigadvisors.com. So it's Burning Issues Group LLC, but it's Burning Issues Group, BIG Advisors. So bigadvisors.com, super simple. So, and my email is paul@bigadvisors. And so we're happy our model is we give the first consulting free. So it could be a 90-minute strategy session. If you've got a small business and you're struggling, we'll give you 90 minutes to try to find some issues and help you look at those. That may lead to a relationship. It may not. It doesn't matter. The other thing is if it's a trades business between $2 and $10 million or 2 to 10 years old, it's kind of our brackets. We'll do a big check 360 where we come on site for a day. So that's 10 hours of free consulting. And then if you like that, if you like the issues that we help you identify, then to build a big plan, that's another 10 hours. And that's at our normal rate, which is $495 an hour. And our close ratio is near 100% because when we come up with 20 to 23 burning issues, like a company recently, their sales are currently at a little over 3 million. And we came up with almost 5 million in burning issues that could be addressed, right? All of a sudden, the $100,000, if we do a 4-week consulting contract, is nothing, right? As Rick likes to say, you want me to keep coming back because you want that money. If you could do it yourself, we wouldn't be here, right? It's the accountability that helps them move forward and do, right?
Listen, thank you very much. This is great. Been fun to listen and sort of follow along the journey, which is fascinating. and hear all the interesting people you've met and things you've done. So thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. And we'll add, like I said, we'll add links into the description. And
The other
otherwise,
site I forgot about is my author and speaking site, which is paulheirendt.com. So since you have the spelling.
yeah, we'll be able to put that. We can put that in as well. All right. So for everybody who watched, listen, thank you very much. To Paul, thank you very much. And until next time.
Thank you
Have a
so
good one.
much.